Midnight, to one of the most chilling tragedies in recorded history, welcome. A story whose whispers echo still across time. Before we start, I extend an invitation for you to leave in the comments your location and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We are interested to know the places and the times of day or night these documented accounts reach. 025, the year was 1911 in New York City. A city of labor, light, and boundless ambition. Into narrow tenements, immigrants crowded. The roar of machines filled factories, and the dream of prosperity saturated the smoky air. Yet within the shadows of progress, danger was lingering. Behind locked doors, hidden. Warnings, ignored. And greed, unchecked. 053, this is the story of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. A tragedy that in less than half an hour silenced 146 souls and for generations reshaped labor rights. At the dawn of the 20th century, New York was a paradox. It was the city of dreams and also the city of despair. By 1911, more than 2 million immigrants called Manhattan home. 120, Italians, Jews, Germans, Irish, and others packed into neighborhoods where laundry hung across narrow alleys and the streets, filled with pushcarts and horse-drawn wagons, were playgrounds for children. With industry, the city was alive. Garments, cigars, and furniture churned out from factories, while the wealth of Wall Street soared. 144, but for the working poor, life was harsh, especially for women. Rents were crushing. In crowded tenements, disease spread quickly, and work meant long hours amid unsafe conditions. The beating heart of New York's economy, the garment industry, employed over 100,000 workers, most of them young immigrant women. They were Europe's daughters, bringing hope but finding hardship. 216, 6 days a week, many worked, 12 to 14 hours a day, for wages barely sufficient for food and rent. On the Lower East Side, the languages of dozens of nations could be heard. But in the factories, the whistle calling workers back to their machines was the only voice that mattered. Booming was the garment trade. 241, a symbol of modernity was the shirtwaist, a fashionable women's blouse. To meet demand, factories sprang up across the city, and none was more prominent than the Triangle Shirtwaist Company. The so-called Shirtwaist Kings, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, founded it, occupying the top 3 floors of the Ask building near Washington Square. 307, fireproof was considered the building, its exterior of brick and steel. But inside, the story differed. The 8th, 9th, and 10th floors were filled with long rows of sewing machines. Lining the workrooms were wooden tables piled with cotton and muslin scraps. A tinderbox was the space, with gas lamps and oil-soaked floors. Often empty were the buckets of water meant for fire safety, and the doors were locked ostensibly to prevent theft, but in practice to keep workers from taking unsupervised breaks or leaving early. 349, in safety, Blank and Harris invested little, despite past fires in their factories. Their focus remained on production, profit, and speed. Though hailed as modern, the Ask building housed a sweatshop primed for disaster within. To understand the magnitude of what would unfold, we must step into the shoes of Triangle's workers. 415, picture a young girl, perhaps 16, hunched over a Singer sewing machine. Thick with lint is the air, her fingers raw from endless stitching. Little English does she speak, her family dependent on her few weekly dollars. Around her, hundreds of others toil. In long skirts, with hair pinned back, women fix their eyes on the work consuming their days. 444, with noise buzzed the factory floor, clattering machines, foremen shouting, the creak of iron chairs. Short were breaks, and few were bathrooms. When leaving, workers were searched to ensure they hadn't stolen a fabric scrap. Frequent were complaints. The doors are locked, some said. Of fire hazards, others whispered, but complaints rarely traveled far. 514, in a world where jobs were scarce and mouths at home were hungry, silence was often the only choice. Still, murmurs of resistance existed. In 1909, a massive garment workers' strike, the uprising of the 20,000, had briefly brought attention to labor conditions. Among the strikers were Triangle workers, but Blank and Harris resisted. 541, when the strike ended, little changed at Triangle. Set was the stage for tragedy. Saturday, March 25, 1911, it was. Nearly over was the workday. Across Washington Square, the afternoon sun stretched shadows as workers sewed final stitches before heading home. Handed out had been pay envelopes. Light were spirits. At approximately 4:40 p.m., fire broke out. 6:08, whether from a cigarette, a match, or a spark, flames erupted in a scrap bin filled with fabric cuttings on the 8th floor. Within seconds, across tables the blaze spread, devouring fabric like kindling. The air filled with shouts of fire. Smoke rose. To a halt screeched machines. Some ran for the elevators, tiny cages carrying only a dozen at a time. 6:37, others bolted to the stairwells, only to find one exit locked. As flames climbed higher, panic surged. Within minutes, to the 9th floor the fire leapt. No warning had the workers there. Through windows flames burst, filling rooms with choking smoke. Narrowed did choices become: burn, suffocate, or leap. Imagine the terror. So thick is the smoke you cannot see. 7:04, your skin blistered by heat. Around you, screams rising. Some tried the fire escape, but under the weight of fleeing workers it collapsed, sending them crashing to their deaths. To windows ran others. Firefighters arrived quickly, but only to the 6th floor did their ladders reach, 3 floors too short. From the 9th and 10th floors, desperate workers leapt, their bodies striking the pavement below. 7:34, one witness, Lewis Waldman, described the horror. I saw girls leaping from the 9th and 10th floors. Thud. Dead bodies on the pavement. The girls jumping from the windows were drowned by the floods of water from the fire hoses. I cannot forget it. Their lives at risk, elevator operators made trip after trip to rescue as many as they could, until heat warped the rails and the elevators jammed. 8:01, later, survivors recalled stuffing into the cars, clutching each other as flames licked at their clothes. In just 18 minutes, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was consumed by fire. In horror, onlookers gathered. Washington Place filled with crowds, their eyes fixed on the inferno above. Powerless, they watched as young women appeared in windows, flames at their backs. 8:32, before leaping, some crossed themselves. Others clasped hands and jumped together. A scene of unspeakable tragedy became the ground below. On the pavement bodies lay. Blood was washed away by fire hoses. And with the silence of shock mingled the screams of survivors. In those moments, the deadly cost of negligence was witnessed by the world. 9:01, forced to see their suffering laid bare in the street, was a city that had built its wealth on workers' backs. By the time the fire was out, 146 workers were dead. Most were young women, some no older than 14. Over Washington Square, silence settled when the fire was finally extinguished. But heavy was the silence, broken only by the weeping of families searching for loved ones among the lifeless bodies laid out along the street. 9:44, 146 men and women perished, most of them immigrant girls in their teens and 20s. In stairwells, in elevators, behind locked doors, and on the unforgiving pavement below, they died. Across New York, news spread swiftly. Harrowing accounts and photographs were carried in the next morning's newspapers. Horrified was the public, already uneasy about sweatshop conditions. 10:20, merely an accident was not the Triangle Fire. It was a national tragedy. On April 5, a massive funeral procession was held. The rain-soaked streets filled with more than 350,000 people, mourning the dead and demanding justice. One of the most haunting images of the tragedy became the sight of endless umbrellas moving in silence. 10:51, in grief walked workers and families together, but also in defiance, signaling that the deaths would not be forgotten. To the factory owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, known as the Shirtwaist Kings, public outrage soon turned. They faced charges of manslaughter. Chilling facts were revealed by the trial. 11:22, indeed, the doors had been locked. Never conducted had been fire drills. Grossly inadequate were safety measures. Of blocked exits and neglected fire escapes, witnesses testified. But ignorance was claimed by Blank and Harris. They argued that during working hours, they did not know the doors were locked. As distant businessmen, not directly responsible for the choices of foremen or building staff, their attorneys painted them. 1154, in the end, them the jury acquitted. Away slipped justice. A mere $75 for each life lost was received by families of the dead, barely enough to cover burial costs. Meanwhile, insurance payouts far exceeding the compensation given to victims' families were collected by Blank and Harris. To the fire of public anger, the trial added fuel. 1221, that without stronger laws tragedies like Triangle would continue was realized by the people of New York. Activism was birthed by the outrage. Louder than ever before, workers, especially women, raised their voices. One of the most powerful speeches in the aftermath was delivered by Rose Schneiderman, a fiery union organizer. This is not the first time girls have been burned alive in the city. 1250, of the untimely death of one of my sister workers, I must learn every week. So cheap is the life of men and women, and so sacred is property. For one job there are so many of us, it matters little if 146 of us are burned to death. Like lightning, her words struck. The cruel imbalance between labor and capital, between profit and human life, they revealed. 1317, momentum for unions like the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, ILGWU, was ignited by the Triangle Fire. They organized strikes, lobbied lawmakers, and fought for safer working conditions. Once silent, women began marching, chanting, and demanding dignity. The national conversation was shaped, for the first time, by the voices of working-class immigrant women. 1347, in the fire's wake, the cries for change could no longer be ignored by New York lawmakers. The Factory Investigating Commission, a sweeping inquiry into labor conditions, was established by the state. Factories were toured by investigators, workers were interviewed, and horrors were documented: overcrowded spaces, blocked exits, children at machines, and unsanitary conditions. 1415, from these investigations came more than 30 new laws. Sprinklers were required in buildings. Mandatory became fire drills. During working hours, doors had to remain unlocked. Limited were work weeks. Into endless hours, women and minors could no longer be forced. Beyond safety, the labor movement itself was reshaped by the fire. 1441, that unity could drive reform was realized by workers. Progressive labor legislation was embraced by politicians pressured by unions and the public. Into new laws, new protections, and a shift in the balance of power between workers and employers echoed the whispers of the Triangle Fire. Simply to 1911 did the Triangle Fire not belong. 1509, across decades reverberated its lessons. Every fire drill in a school, every illuminated exit sign in a theater, every sprinkler system in a modern office, these are the legacies of the Triangle workers. In vain their deaths were not. The safeguards we live with today became their whispers. But warnings also serve the echoes. 1532, even in modern times, workplace tragedies occur where profit outweighs safety, where voices are silenced, and where workers are treated as expendable. Have we truly learned? The Triangle Fire asks us. Or are we still ignoring whispers until they become screams? Through one of the most chilling tragedies recorded in history, welcome to this journey. 1558, a story whose whispers still echo across time. With a fire in a scrap bin, we began. And with 146 lives etched into history, we end. From memory their names may fade, but the world was reshaped by their story. More than flames was the Triangle Fire. It was a turning point. From its ashes rose unions, reforms, and a new awareness of the value of human life over profit. 1628, in silence did not perish the workers who died. A roar that forced a nation to change became their whispers. As you finish this story, remember that the rights we enjoy today, safety laws, working hours, fire codes, were bought at a terrible cost. Gifts they are not, but legacies carved from sacrifice. If you were moved by the whispers of the past, share this story. 5 p.m. Below, comment where you are watching from and when. Across time and space, let the voices of the Triangle Fire reach, ensuring they are never forgotten.